You know, when you think about Earth from space, that image, it's always that vibrant blue,
Oh,
isn't it?
absolutely. The pale blue dot. It's iconic.
Totally. But what if that's actually like a newer look? What if for billions of years our oceans weren't blue, but green?
Yeah, it sounds wild, right? But that's exactly what this new study out of Japan is suggesting. It was published in Nature.
Okay, nature. So serious stuff.
Definitely. And, you know, for anyone listening who wants to get the lowdown on this without digging through the actual paper, well, that's what we're here for.
Right. We're doing the deep dive so you don't have to.
Exactly. We'll unpack this idea of green oceans, what it means for early life, Earth's history, and maybe even its future.
A pale green dot. Huh. It really changes that mental picture. So this study, it connects ocean color to what, the chemistry back then and early life.
Precisely. It's all linked. The chemistry of the early oceans, the evolution of the first photosynthesizers, it all plays a part.
Okay, so our mission today, figure out why green and what does it tell us? And maybe touch on whether our blue oceans are here to stay.
Sounds like a plan. And it really hinges on understanding these ancient clues left behind in rocks, things called banded iron formations.
Ah, yeah, I've seen pictures, those incredible layered rocks, kind of red and gray
Those
stripes.
are the ones, they're basically geological records laid down, between about 3.8 and 1.8 billion years ago, way, way back.
So Archean eon, mostly, a huge chunk of Earth's history, and life back then was.
Pretty simple. Mostly single-celled organisms living in the oceans. The continents were basically just barren rock.
Okay, so rain hits the rocks, washes stuff into the ocean.
Exactly. Dissolved iron specifically. Plus you had iron coming from undersea volcanoes. So the early oceans were just swimming in dissolved iron.
Right, lots of iron. And the key thing the study mentions is that the atmosphere, the oceans, they didn't really have free oxygen floating around yet, did they?
Not in gaseous form, no. That's crucial because right around this time, you get the first organisms figuring out photosynthesis using sunlight for energy.
But they did it without oxygen, anaerobic photosynthesis.
That's right. They didn't need oxygen. But, and this is the kicker, they actually produced oxygen as a waste product.
Ah, so life starts making oxygen, but there's nowhere for it to go initially because the iron.
You got it. All that dissolved iron in the water acted like a giant chemical sponge. The moment oxygen was produced, bam, it reacted with the iron.
Okay, so it's like the iron had to be filled up with oxygen first.
Pretty much, it had to be oxidized. Only after most of the dissolved iron had reacted could oxygen start building up in the water and then eventually leak out into the atmosphere.
And that leads to the Great Oxidation Event, right? Which was like a massive deal for life evolving later on.
Huge deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
and those banded iron formations, those stripes, they kind of record this transition. You get layers of iron deposited without much oxygen, and then layers with oxidized iron, the reddish stuff.
Makes sense. So that's the background. How does this new study connect that iron-rich, low-oxygen ocean to the color green?
Okay, so this is where they bring in a modern example. They looked at the waters around the volcanic island of Iwo Jima.
Iwo Jima, what's happening there?
The water near the island has this noticeable greenish tint, and the researchers linked that green color to the presence of oxidized iron, specifically Fe, iron that's reacted with some oxygen.
Okay. Oxidized iron making water green. I usually think of rust as red or brown.
Well, it depends on the form and concentration, and likely the presence of other things. And interestingly, they also found lots of blue-green algae thriving in those same green waters.
Blue-green algae, which aren't really algae, they're bacteria, right? Cyanobacteria.
Correct. Always good to remember that. And these cyanobacteria, they were some of the earliest photosynthesizers. They have chlorophyll, like plants.
Which makes plants look green because it absorbs red and blue light.
Right. But these cyanobacteria also have another pigment. It's called a phycoerythrobilin, PB for short.
PB. Okay, what's special about PB?
Well, the researchers did something clever. They genetically tweaked some modern cyanobacteria to have more P. And they found these tweaked ones grew better specifically under green light.
Whoa. So chlorophyll's good for broad light, but P gives an edge if the light available is mostly green.
That seems to be the idea. If those early oceans, full of those fine particles of oxidized iron from the first puffs of photosynthesis, were scattering light in a way that made the surface waters appear greenish.
Then having P would have been a real advantage for those early photosynthesizers.
Exactly. It suggests an adaptation to that specific environment.
Yeah.
And their computer models backed this up. They showed that early photosynthesis could have produced enough of these iron particles to Yeah, potentially make the oceans look green from the surface.
So our planet might have been a pale green dot for a long, long time.
Quite possibly. And that has implications for looking for life elsewhere.
Right. Instead of just looking for pale blue dots, maybe we should be looking for pale green ones too, as a sign of early iron-rich photosynthesis.
It gives us another potential biosignature to consider. Yeah. A green tinge might actually indicate a specific earlier stage of life's development on a planet with similar chemistry.
That's fascinating. Are the telescopes we have now or the ones coming online actually capable of spotting that kind of subtle color difference on an exoplanet?
That's the hope. Things like the James Webb Space Telescope and future missions are designed to analyze the atmospheres and reflected light from exoplanets in much more detail. It's challenging for sure, but looking for those specific spectral signatures, maybe a greenish hue, it's on the list.
It's just wild thinking about that time scale, the Archean, 1.5 billion years. That's
Mhm.
almost unbelievable. So this color change, green to blue, it wasn't quick.
Oh, definitely not. We're talking incredibly long timescales. It was likely very gradual, maybe even went back and forth a bit as oxygen levels fluctuated before stabilizing.
Which could explain why the cyanobacteria kept both pigments. Chlorophyll for general light, PA for when things were greener, sort of hedging their bets.
That makes evolutionary sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Having both would give them flexibility during that long transition period, a real advantage.
Okay, so past,
Hmm.
maybe green, present, familiar blue. But the study didn't stop there, did it? It hinted oceans could change color again.
It did, because the colors tied to the chemistry and the life. Change those, and the color could change too.
So what other colors are potentially on the table?
Well, they discussed purple oceans. Imagine that.
Purple. How would that happen?
If you had conditions with really high sulfur levels, maybe from massive volcanic eruptions and very little oxygen in the deep water, you could get an environment where purple sulfur bacteria thrive.
Wow. Purple oceans. Okay, what else? Red.
Red is another possibility, yeah.
Red.
Could happen a couple of ways. Maybe much more intense tropical weathering, washing lots of oxidized iron off the land, tinting coastal waters red.
Or maybe algae, like red tides.
Exactly. You could get blooms of certain algae that cause red tides. If conditions favored them on a much wider scale, perhaps due to nutrient runoff from, say, fertilizers or other major ecological shifts, you could see more reddish waters.
We see red tides now locally, often linked to pollution. Could that become a global thing? Would that signal a pretty sick planet?
Well, a global red ocean would imply really significant planet-wide changes in ocean chemistry and ecosystems, likely driven by major climate shifts or, yes, potentially widespread pollution effects. It's more of a theoretical possibility linked to extreme environmental change rather than just scaling up today's localized events.
Sobering. And then there's the really, really long-term view, the sun changing.
Right. As our sun gets older, it gets brighter, hotter, puts out more UV radiation. That could be tough on the phytoplankton living near the surface.
So the base of the food web gets hit hard.
Potentially, yeah. And that might create opportunities for other microbes, maybe those purple sulfur bacteria again, or others adapted to low oxygen or different light conditions, especially in deeper or coastal waters. So you can see shifts towards purple or maybe brown, or even back towards green in some areas.
So the blue is really just a phase.
In the grand scheme of things, potentially yes.
Yeah.
And eventually, billions of years from now, as the sun expands, well, the oceans will eventually boil away entirely.
Okay, let's not dwell on that too much, but it definitely hammers home the point.
It really does. Ocean color isn't just cosmetic. It's a direct readout of the planet's chemistry and the life that's shaped it and been shaped by it.
So wrapping up, the big takeaway is that our familiar blue planet probably had a long green youth thanks to iron and early photosynthesis.
And its future color isn't necessarily guaranteed to be blue either. It all depends on that interplay between geology, chemistry, and biology.
It's one of those aha moments, isn't it? Realizing something you take completely for granted, like the ocean being blue, is actually the result of this immense, long-running process.
Absolutely. It makes you rethink what's normal for a planet.
Totally. And it leaves you wondering, what else about Earth that seems so fundamental, so permanent, might have a completely different backstory or a surprising future? All driven by that constant dance between life and the planet itself, really makes you think about how dynamic this world is.